अब माननीय प्रधानमंत्री प्रस्थान कर रहे हैं।
A satisfied Prime Minister, a satisfying conclusion and a happy conclusion to a joyous celebration as India steps into its 76th year of independence.
अलग अलग दीर्घाओं में जो लोग यहां मौजूद, उनमें उत्साह, हम संकल्प से सिद्धि की भावना के साथ अमृतकाल से गुजर रहे हैं। देश के युवाओं में नया जोश है, उनकी आंखों में नए सपने हैं, बच्चों के सामने प्रेरणादायी कहानियां हैं। अगले 25 वर्षों में
And with that, the Independence Day ceremony has concluded. You can see Prime Minister Narendra Modi has left the Red Fort now after addressing the nation from the Red Fort, leading the celebrations as India marks 75 years of independence today. During his address, Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid down a 5-point plan for a developed India. Prime Minister Modi laid down 5 resolves for Amrit Kal towards a developed India, removing any vestiges of colonialism, retaining our roots, ensuring unity in diversity, and also emphasizing on every citizen to carry out their duties. He highlighted that corruption and dynastic politics were two of the biggest challenges in India currently. Now, in his address at the Red Fort, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also called on the collective spirit of 130 crore people and the Team India spirit to take the country forward and to ensure that it's a developed nation in the next 25 years. And for more on this, our principal diplomatic correspondent Sidhant Sibbal is now joining us live. Thank you so much for joining us now, Sidhant. Now, during his address, Sidhant, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has laid out a 5-point plan, a very extensive, in-depth plan. What can you tell us about that? Can you break that down for us?
Well, it was almost 1.5 hour long speech, almost 90-minute speech, in which there was a fair mix of everything, whether it's the pride on the 75th anniversary of India's independence, whether it's talk taking as to what India needs to do, or whether it's the roadmap for next 25 years, that is the Amrit Kal. And of course, the Panch Pran that was given by the Indian Prime Minister was how India can become a developed country, talking about unity, talking about how Indians need to remove last remnants of slavery, and also talking about the issues which the Indians need to talk about, especially when it comes to nepotism, and of course talking about the issue of corruption as well. So a lot of things he talked about, a special emphasis also given to women empowerment as well. He paid homage to the Indian freedom fighters. But today, of course, his speech was largely an occasion to pay tribute to people who fought against British colonialism, and we saw the diplomatic the community here in Delhi was present in full force. But there was a mention also about the Indian government's policy, especially especially on Atmanirbhar Bharat, that's Make in India. He especially mentioned the BrahMos deal with the Philippines. This is something that that of course could make into the newspapers in the Philippines, and we know that this is the biggest defense deal India has had in last 75 years. We can expect more such deals as well. India is working with countries like Egypt, Malaysia. So as the day progresses, we will see more celebrations from across the country and indeed across the world as well.
Absolutely, Sidhant. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also mentioned how global perception of India has changed. Also, like you mentioned, emphasizing on a self-reliant country and also called out corruption and nepotism. Now, Prime Minister Modi called India the mother of democracy. Can you just take us through some of those 5 key points that he mentioned in his speech?
Well, those 5 key points were part of the Panch Pran, which is the 5 key takeaways of how India can become a developed world by 2047. That's 100th anniversary of the independence. Talking about unity, talking about how Indians need to remove last remnants of slavery, and of course other related issues as well. But of course he emphasized how India is a strong voice when it comes to global affairs, world platforms, and how world is looking up to India when it comes to various issues. As I was talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, a specific mention being made by the Indian Prime Minister, but largely his focus was a roadmap as to how India needs to work on various issues, especially when it comes to corruption as well. But largely lauded the role of Indians as well in terms of how they have been working in last 75 years, paying homage to the Indian freedom fighters.
Right, Sidhant. Now, we discussed this earlier as well, how India is part of various initiatives and has maintained resolve and firm stance in face of adversities in the global community as well. And we have seen so far this year, this very evidently. How do you see India's role evolving in the global community?
Well, India's role is evolving in a sense, a strong power. It is, of course, helping the world in various issues. We saw amidst the COVID crisis how India reached out, whether it's HCQ or whether it's sending vaccines to the global community, starting with the region. In fact, today is an important day in the neighborhood. India is going to hand over Dornier maritime patrol aircraft to Sri Lanka. The ceremony happens at 12 noon local time, where the Sri Lankan president will be present along with the Indian ambassador Gopal Bagle. That shows that how India is taking a lead, whether it's the region, whether it's the world. And of course, the fact that the Indian Prime Minister specifically mentioned the BrahMos deal from the ramparts of the Red Fort shows the intent of the Indian government in terms of becoming a superpower in the defense sector as well, in terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat or Make in India defense. India is part of various global initiatives, whether it's SCO, Squad, I2U2, BRICS. Really, in fact, there is no example of a country which is part of both the SCO, the Quad, the I2U2. That shows that how the global community is trying to woo New Delhi in terms of being partner, being a close ally. In fact, there have been statements issued by the US President Joe Biden, by the Australian Prime Minister as well, and we will see more statements from the global community on India's Independence Day.
Right, absolutely. And when we talk of a self-reliant India and the team spirit of the 1.3 billion people of India, what sort of plan of action can we see going forward for the next 25 years?
Well, the Indian Prime Minister has given his intent. He has listed out the five key takeaways for Amrit Kal, how India needs to go about in next 25 years. So these are long-term indication of what the Indians need to do. He talked about what the Indians have their duty towards their motherland, but also talked about issues like unity and, of course, issues like corruption, women empowerment. But largely, while this is a speech in which he indicated, highlighted, pointed out the key things Indians need to do. It is also a roadmap speech coming at a time when we have seen a lot of geopolitical changes, not only in the region but across the world. In fact, India has emerged as an island of stability in a region which is mired in political instability. You look at Pakistan, you can look at Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and of course an increasingly aggressive China. So today's speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort is not only for Indians but also for the region, for the global community, who will be carefully studying the speech as to what the Indian Prime Minister has to offer at a time when, of course, the world is looking up to India for support for issues like climate change. And of course, something that we will hear in next few months will be the UNSC reforms, as well as India is a non-permanent member of the UNSC, and India becomes the president of the council in the month of December. We could expect the Indian Prime Minister to go to New York to address the UNSC, where of course he is expected to talk about the need to reform and give India a place, a country which will be soon the most populous country in the world.
Right, absolutely, Sidhant, you're correct. Everyone is going to be looking at the speech very closely and listening to it over and over again. But let's just talk about carrying out citizens' duties and corruption and dynastic politics that he mentioned and emphasized on. What sort of reforms can we expect, if any?
Well, the fact that the Indian Prime Minister mentioned about the issue of corruption shows that how it remains a worry for the Indian government, for of course the Indian people as well. We know that 2014, when the Prime Minister took charge, he came on the plank of fighting corruption, and since then the Indian government has taken a number of reform measures, including of course demonetization, which the Indian government has said has helped in curbing black money. We know that at the G20 as well, the Indian leadership, the Indian Prime Minister, when he visited the G20 in Australia, he talked specifically on the issue of black money, and we saw how the G20 worked towards it, and we have now policies to fight against black money. There was a global pressure on the issue of black money, especially on countries where of course there are safe havens when it comes to hiding the black money. But largely, corruption aside, the women empowerment looks like another key initiative in which we could see more announcements by the Indian government. He specifically talked about the need to change the mindset regarding how, of course, people in their day-to-day life deal with women. There are, of course, reports almost on a daily basis on crime against women. This is something, of course, worrisome, and that is why the fact that the Indian Prime Minister has mentioned about it from his speech from Red Fort is something that is a strong message to every Indian. And we know that his speech from the Red Fort has now become a key speech in terms of the policy of the Indian government.
Right, absolutely. And when it comes to further cooperation and strengthening its role in regional geopolitics and also in the global community, Sidhant, where can we see India? How can we see India going forward?
Well, in terms of the global community, we know that how India, of course, has been talking to various stakeholders, and of course, whether it's the West, whether it's the East, India, of course, has been taking a stance which is in the self-interest of the people of the country, a more practical implementation of foreign policy. We know that, for example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is something that might look far away from New Delhi, but remember, since then there has been two major impacts. One of course is cheap Russian crude oil. India continues to buy despite a lot of comments coming from the West, and of course the Indian External Affairs Minister has publicly slammed the West for these comments. In fact, recently at the Lahore rally of Imran Khan, he lauded EM for the stance. The second, of course, is the issue of food security. We know that while food security remains a top concern, India has been reaching out to countries like Yemen to support them, especially providing them wheat. In fact, recently India sent wheat to Afghanistan as well. That shows that how India is also reaching out in terms of on-the-ground support to countries.
Right. Well, Sidhant, thank you so much for joining us and bringing us all the updates and key takeaways from this speech. Thank you so much. And with that, we call to wrap on this edition of the News Bulletin. Don't go anywhere. We will be back very soon with more global news and updates.